The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the Para X Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight. Those here in the chat room and those listening from around the world. We appreciate each and every one. Tonight we've got a great show lined up, and we have one of our favorite people that's going to be with us talking. And there ought to be a whole lot of information flying all over the place. So tonight we have with us Barbara Duncan.
Good. Hello, everybody, from sunny and very hot California.
And we have Jeffrey Gould.
Hello.
And we have Tabby Cat Gash.
How you doing, everybody?
Now, since we've got a whole lot to talk about, I'm going to let Jeff go ahead and introduce our guest.
Absolutely. Well, tonight we have our longtime friend of the show and one of our favorite returning guests, Thomas Wertman. He's a former dean of the American National University and state director of MUFON and former co-director at, but still works with, the Cleveland Ufology Project. So welcome back, Thomas Wertman. Yay!
Thank you. One of these days I got to change that to happily retired.
Oh, where are you happily from? What, all of it, or?
No, not the UFO stuff. I'm actually doing now what I wanted to do for years. A lot more UFO research, but happily retired away from all the, let's say, challenges of daily life of going to work.
So, I guess right to start with, before we go into all the good stuff, how or I should say why, did MUFON move their headquarters back to Cincinnati?
Well, the biggest thing is the gentleman who took over as international director, David McDonald. He had the position before, and he reassumed the reins, and he's from Cincinnati. It's the easiest way to put it. And it's a reasonably central location in the country. David has an airlines down there, Flamingo Airlines, that he operates. And when you saw Hangar 1, I think part of the implication is a lot of the UFO files were in his aircraft hangar. And with the MUFON headquarters moving back, that's where it's going to be located at again, is at Lunken Airport down in Cincinnati, where David's out of.
Right. Well, that ought to be good, because there is a lot of stuff that goes on in this, in southern Ohio and, well, all over Ohio. Maybe you get more help and coverage with the headquarters being closer.
Well, the coverage may stay the same, but one thing I'm interested in, MUFON has a tremendous amount of hard copy files, not just in reports we've taken, but in other individuals who have some great historical research. One of the individuals, his name was Leonard Stringfield. He was a great researcher. He gathered a tremendous amount of evidence going back a number of years ago. And people have always wanted to see his files because he kept them very private. Well, MUFON doesn't have all of them, but MUFON has, I believe, about half of them. And I'm really interested in going down and seeing what's in those files, because I love to see the historical stuff. Now, they won't be open to everybody, but they'll be open to, like my case, since I'm a state director, and they're open to other individuals within MUFON. But I want to go down and see what's in those, especially stuff that's within our own state. Like you're saying, Henry, going back to looking at stuff, potentially, let's see, what if there's stories in there related back to Wright-Patterson and stuff like that?
Oh, all right.
Yeah, that's some of the stuff I'm interested in, because one of the cases that came out back that happened in the 1990s was a case that happened in Youngstown, Ohio, about a UFO that was seen by police officers. And there's 911 tapes out of the audio of that event. Well, that was discovered by accident because an individual called Kenny Young was reviewing some old stuff from Leonard Stringfield's files. He was looking for a reported crash of a UFO down by Dayton that was supposedly mentioned in the files. But he actually stumbled on a totally separate event. He was actually looking for an event down by Liberty, Ohio, which was down by the Dayton area, if I'm correct. Right. Well, when Directory Assistance connected him with the police department, he actually got connected with Liberty Township, which is over in Youngstown, completely in the opposite side of the state. But he stumbled on a really interesting case of all the 911 tapes. And you can hear the officers talking about stuff and people seeing things, and it's a great case. But I can't help but wonder, what else happens to be in those, like, Stringfield files. And those are eventually coming back to Ohio because, to my understanding, they were out, like, I believe in California. And that, a lot of that stuff is going to be moving back to here. So from my point of view, I think it's great that the headquarters is close. Also, we've kind of got that tie into, like, Dayton, Wright-Patterson stuff down there. So I'm really looking forward to it myself.
Now, do you think there would be anything in the files dealing or secret about what's at Wright-Pat?
I don't know. That's the big thing that I'd want to sit down and go through these, because I'm not sure how much they've really been going through already. Because there may be a substantial amount of material there, and for people to go through, I mean, you could spend hours, days, who knows, maybe weeks going through this stuff. So who knows what's in those files? I've got some older historical stuff myself that it took me a long time to go through, Henry. And there was no smoking guns like, that, there were aliens down at Wright-Patterson and so forth. Nothing in writing. But you get the stories secondhand from individuals that, on one hand, you're like, okay, it's secondhand. But on the other hand, Henry, you say, wait a minute, maybe some of these strange things are really true, Yeah. Because I've had the stories where, with one of the Cleveland groups I was in, one of the former members who's passed away was reportedly called down to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to assist with an autopsy a number of years ago. He happened to be involved with Case Western, which is with the Cleveland Clinic, one of the best hospitals in the country. He was well respected. Somebody told me his specialty was like forensic analysis, but I think it was more into the chemistry side. And the story came back that he did reportedly help perform an autopsy on an alien down at Wright-Pat. Now, again, you've got no pictures. You've got nothing other than the stories from people. But what I thought was interesting, though, is I was involved with a team with MUFON. And we were talking about abductions, bodies, and so forth on there. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this doctor's name came up as being mentioned, being involved with an autopsy. It wasn't from somebody in my area. It was somebody from completely out on the West Coast. So I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. They heard this guy was involved with the autopsy clear out there. Has this story maybe just gotten around a lot? Or maybe there's more truth to it than what we realize.
Well, don't they have a tendency to get people that are pretty much nondescript, in other words, non-high profile type of people to assist in such things? Because this way they can kind of control the narrative and perhaps discredit them in the long run.
This guy was really, really well respected. And the clinic has a number of the top facilities in different areas in the country. The thing about him also is he was involved with the UFO group, which I thought was interesting. I'm like, wait a minute, if you brought this guy down, wouldn't you kind of check his background out to see what he was doing? You know?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
But in his real life, though, they said that he kept a very, very low profile. He didn't talk about UFOs. He would go to the meetings. He would do things. But he would keep a very low profile. Most of the people didn't even, the way I understand it, didn't even know that he was a doctor involved with the clinic.
Huh.
He just wanted to keep that part of his life private.
Well, that sounds like one of the type of people that they would want then, because that way they wouldn't want to draw attention to themselves.
And you hear the story, and supposedly, Hunter Cat, he had a photograph that he took of one of these entities, but we could never track it down. He supposedly put in like a safety deposit box, and then once he passed, who knows what happened, to that stuff.
Well, where do you suppose that the government would quite possibly do most of these type of experiments? I mean, there's been speculation that, they do things at Area 51, or they do things at Wright-Patterson. But is there someplace else here in the United States that is probably more of a good candidate to have those type of facilities to do experiments and so forth that isn't just commonly known?
Well, you've got areas that they're known out like Utah area that they've had going on for a number of years. And when you hear some of the stories about these places, like in this case, the one out in Utah, they actually developed bioweapons, gases and so forth. This is where they had an incident back a number of years ago where there's like 1,000 sheep that got killed.
Yeah.
Because there was an agent that they were using that they had on board of a helicopter. They supposedly dumped it over more like an unpopulated area, a rural area. But on their way back, there was still some of that material left in the tanks that came out. Killed like 1,000 sheep. So, but on the other hand, when you think about it, people may be more unlikely to try to get into an area where they're testing poison gases, developing things, weapons. Those are type of regions they may not want to go into.
Well, you'd be surprised. There's a whole lot of people that would say, no, screw it. I'm going to go in there anyway. I want to see what's going on.
Didn't Spielberg use that as part of his Close Encounters movie?
That was correct.
Yeah.
That was right.
But from what I understand, the gas they reference in the film is not a sedative. It was actually a deadly gas to kill those.
So there's some areas like that. And to me, honestly, they may have an area where it could be in plain sight as one option. That's why I still don't rule out, maybe not so much Wright-Patterson. The early days, most likely Wright-Patterson. But they may have moved it out to some other facilities, but it still may be a location in plain sight. It may not be a base like Area 51.
Right.
So the little alien on Highway 61 is probably a bed and breakfast for extraterrestrials.
Well, if they can tolerate staying in the the trailers out there in 116-degree weather, they're welcome to it.
And then we'll end up seeing all these little critters on Netflix. Some brand new series.
That's right. Oh, and I did watch that TV series Resident Alien after we talked that one time. I binge watched that.
Good.
What did you think?
That was funny. And I hope they go into season 2 because you did have to laugh at a lot of it, as crazy as it was.
Yeah.
Especially the alien convention at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Going into meeting Giorgio.
Yeah.
That was good. I did enjoy that.
Well, that and, I guess, Thomas, and you can probably provide a little bit of insight, but when people who don't know anything about UFOs would go to a convention like that, it has to be a question of the pros at it, which are kind of just going, most of this is fluff, let's go to the good stuff. And then you get the people who are newbies at it, who walk in there and must think that they have landed on Mars.
Yeah, and you're right. Coincidentally, this week was Roswell, the festival out there.
Yes.
And I was kidding somebody the other day. I said, you could go out to Roswell right now and dress up as an alien, and nobody would notice you. you would blend right into the crowd. But you're right. I've gone to the different conventions out there, and you get, like in this case, the ones who are familiar with what really goes on, the different things going on at the conferences. And a number of times what I would do is, if there were speakers talking that I'd never heard before, I'd go in and listen to them. But if there were ones which I'd heard before, sometimes the routine is pretty much the same, conference, from one to the next. So I'll go into the other rooms where you may have speakers who are like selling their books, doing other things, and you may be able to sit down and talk to them for a while, uninterrupted, and just have a very down-to-earth conversation. But then you get some of the other people out there completely on the other side who aren't familiar with these things going on. And you can typically pick out the newbies when they go in there just by their actions. One person I knew of wanted to talk, let me tell them all about my abduction experiences. I want to tell them all about this, all about that. And I'm thinking, they don't want to hear all of that stuff, most likely. They hear it all weekend long. And it's just respecting that person, the speakers, the different ones who put the time and effort into all this stuff going around the country. It's respecting them. And then, like you say, you get some of the ones who dress up, put on the dealy boppers or whatever, go walking around. And they don't realize that some of the speakers may be completely offended by that.
Yeah.
There was one that, I won't mention her name out of respect, but she was extremely upset when they made her stand in front of these little cartoonish like alien figures. And she told me afterwards, she says, I treat this as a very, very serious subject. And, I'll tolerate this type of stuff, but I do not, really appreciate it just out of what she feels about the subject.
Yeah, I guess there is a level of humor that you have to have, especially with what most would call a fringe subject. And you do kind of have to laugh at yourself, but the serious academics or the people who are into this for very valid reasons, and some of them probably very traumatic, it would have an effect.
Yeah. And she was extremely upset at this, and I didn't realize how upset she was going to be until they said, we want to get your picture in front of these aliens doing this. I'm like, and I could just see the look on her face. And then she didn't say anything to them. She was very pleasant. She just went through with it. But later on, that's when all the story came out. That, hey, I didn't appreciate this. And me, I just look at it from the aspect, you've got all types of people out there coming to the conventions, coming to the talks I give, and you just have to be respectful. Because
there's
a lot
also
of
people. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
There's a lot of people out there that mix humor with seriousness. They believe in what's going on in the universe. They definitely believe that there are aliens out there. And it's like some people that deal with grief in a different way, where instead of crying a lot, they might laugh a little bit more or something, based on the type of person that they're grieving about. And I think sometimes some of these people, when they go out and dress up at some of these places, it's almost like they're trying to identify. Some people are not necessarily trying to be disrespectful. They're just trying to identify with their own belief system. It's their way of showing support that, yes, I believe in this. And
yeah, I agree with that, Kat. They just wanted to be part of the group, and the one thing that's happened now since all the Pentagon stuff came out and all these stories within the last few months is I've got a lot of phone calls from individuals and in what I call the senior circuit, 60s, 70s, and they just want to tell their story. Well, I had this thing happen to me back in the 1960s. You're probably going to think I'm crazy. No, just go ahead. And what I do is I provide them a platform to go ahead and tell their story. And the other night, I had one that sometimes your patience wears thin, but I was on the phone for like an hour and a half to 2 hours the other night. And the individual would tell me one story, then he would go on to another story. Well, let me tell you about another thing. Let me tell you about another. They tell you about, and he was just wanting to get the stories out. And when you really, I think, scrape a lot of it away, he may have been an individual who had a very traumatic experience back in the 60s. And now a lot of the things are carrying over, that he's seeing stuff, and it may not be a UFO whatsoever. He may be misidentifying things. And I think that's based on the number of the claims that he had, that appeared to be the case. But I think when you really scrub it away, there may have been a very, very major event years ago. And the thing is, he never had anybody to talk to.
Yeah.
So all this stuff just keeps building up year after year after year. I mean, all these decades. And he wants to get it out. And this whole thing of not being able to get it out, maybe he keeps seeing all these other things now, and he automatically is just assuming they're UFOs because he just has this intense feeling in him.
Well, exactly how much do you think these reports are going to add to reigniting some of that post-traumatic stress or repressed memories that people have had over decades?
I've been getting, just in our state, and they're not being turned as official reports. I'm getting direct phone calls a couple times a week just out of the clear blue sky. The individual may actually reach out to me initially through Facebook or some other service like that and say, I'd like to talk to you, and I'll pass my contact information on to them, but typically a couple of them a week. So going on the last, couple months, there's about 16 or so times I've had phone calls coming in from individuals who just want to get these stories out. And I'm just curious on where it's going to keep going to, because like if the Pentagon thing keeps building, if we get more information coming out there, we may be getting a lot more of these stories on there, Barbara. Who knows? Who knows exactly how many?
Well, that kind of touches on a point that I noticed in this preliminary assessment on unidentified aerial phenomena. I went ahead and looked it up and printed it out and read it. And I thought it was pretty interesting that now in this document, they're trying to tell people that they should put aside the quote-unquote stigma of, not coming forward and telling their story, which kind of contradicts what the military and the government has been doing for years. About every time somebody decided to talk about this thing, it was either hushed up or swept under the rug, or people were even threatened to keep their mouth shut. So by them telling people, well, hey, we want to know about this stuff, forget about what all you've heard and everything, throw the stigma out the window. We want to hear from you. It's like throw open the doors and let them talk about it.
You're exactly right. It's kind of like, okay, here's my crazy off-the-wall analogy. It's kind of like being given the old Etch-a-Sketch that's got the picture on it. Now let's turn it upside down, let's shake it, and let's start fresh. Forget about everything else in the past. Forget about potentially anything with Roswell, anything at Rendlesham Forest, all these other major cases. The Travis Waltons of the world, the Betty and Barney Hills. Forget about all that stuff, the stigma and stuff. Let's just start fresh, Well, you can't completely, forget about all the things, like the things that they did to, disprove at times, like Travis Walton, Betty and Barney Hill, all these other cases, Rendlesham Forest, the stuff that they brought out. And now you're wanting to say, okay, let's start fresh and do serious investigation. Going to be a challenge.
It's government gaslighting at its best, really. You know, sorry about the past. I won't do it again. I promise.
Yeah.
With their fingers crossed behind their back.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there are a number of things in that report, but I've got a couple of unique takes on that, though, on the whole report. And some people in the UFO community may not be happy with some of the things they say, but I'm saying them in all seriousness. To begin with, I don't know what you thought about the report, Kat, when you saw it. I mean, all 9 pages?
Yeah.
The fact that it's 9 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the 9 pages don't say much. You could have put whatever it was that they wanted to say in about 2.
Okay,
well,
and that,
why it wasn't 9,000 pages is telling as well.
I would have thought that there'd have been a whole lot more that come out there. They can't just say, "Well, we don't know what it is," blah blah blah, and that's it. You know, they've been studying this stuff for what, 40 years, 50 years?
Oh.
Yeah, and here's my take on it, though. I mean, when I saw it to begin with, 9 pages. Now, there's actually 2 reports. This is the public one. There's another one that went to Congress.
Right.
It's the long version. The first thought that went through my mind as I'm flipping through the pages, and I remember being back like in high school English class, having to write a report. Let's see, I've got a cover page. That's page 1. That counts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You've got an index.
Wait a minute. Page number 2, and I've got it in front of me right now. And also, by the way, Henry, I sent it to you through Skype.
Oh, okay. I haven't.
The final page, or matter of fact, there's one page that I had to crack up laughing at. It says Appendix A. These are definitions of key terms. UAP stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena.
Yeah.
UAP report. This is a report based on unidentified aerial phenomena. So I threw out page 2, to be honest with you. So I took 2 pages out already of my classroom report, so I'm down to 7. Then I go back to page 9, the final page, which says, these are questions that the Senate specifically wanted in the report. They wanted these answered. So he had Appendix B was actually the questions that they were supposed to be answering in the report. I wouldn't consider that the report either, so I took 3 pages out already. So now I'm down to 6, and if you really look at some of the pages, they're only half pages. So really we only have about 5.5 pages of content at best.
Uh-huh.
So
and
you've got
about 2 of it that actually explains itself and or does not repeat itself.
Correct. So I was disappointed in that aspect because I felt like I was looking at a high school report for English class.
Uh-huh.
Let's just fill 9 pages because we were told to.
Yep.
Content was very superficial. It's almost like you had to write a book report and you didn't read the book, you watched the movie. And you're trying to be superficial so that you don't make a mistake and say something in that's in the movie that was actually not in the book.
Yeah. It was like somebody trying to justify their job by making sure that they spent the last 2 hours doing a report that they could have only taken about 20 minutes to do.
Yeah. Now, I did have some my own personal positive takeaways with it, though.
Okay.
To begin with, before I get to those, they mentioned in there that they limited to 144 reports, of which one was a positive identification relating to a balloon that they never mentioned where the balloon was. So
and even why bother to mention it in the first place? I mean, why even bother to put it in the list?
Exactly. So it's like, okay, if you're not just going to tell me a deflating balloon with nothing else and with that, I can't relate to which case that was referring to.
Yeah.
And then they said that, okay, of that, 80% of those reports had involved observations with multiple sensors. Now, this is the one thing I looked at in particular. Multiple sensors. Well, when you look at sensors, most of the reports we get in from at MUFON are based on witness observations. They may be supported by video, photographs, etc., but the bulk of those, and I would be safe in saying that, let's see, 80 and 144 works out to be maybe 56% or something like that, roughly, off the top of my head. But of the cases we get at MUFON, we don't get in over half the cases containing photographs or videos. It's all based on really one sensor, the human observation. So when they're telling me that over half of their cases had multiple sensors, now it's just not only witness testimony. Now, they weren't specific in which those different sensors were, but they break down into four categories. The humans, they called it human intelligence, which is basically people making observations. That was one category. But then you had one which is signals intelligence, which these objects that they were observing could have been putting out a radio frequency of some sort. They may have had a transmitter on these things that were being picked up by some sort of military system. And of these 144 cases, by the way, they were all involving pretty much military cases or something that came in from the government. They weren't private cases on there.
Yeah.
So they were picking up some sort of a signal as a possibly second form of intelligence. You also had, in this case, geospatial intelligence, which could fall into satellite data. It can fall into potentially maybe like infrared or something attained by satellite data. They may even had sensors underwater that were picking up certain things. So they didn't define, how many of these cases really fell into that category. Yeah. And even had one that was another one, which is measurement and signatures intelligence, which is radar data, acoustical signatures, infrared, electro-optical, radio signals, etc. So they're getting a second set of data from these other sensors, to me, which is a big thing.
Right.
It also means that they're throwing everything but the kitchen sink at this right now, right?
Yeah, you're right. They're pulling all of their resources that they've got to say, are we picking these things up by any of our sensors on our military systems? Now, something I thought was interesting on the negative part, though, is they said that, well, our sensors aren't really the best for maybe approaching UAPs, looking at UAPs, identifying UAPs. I'm like, wait a minute. You've got some of the most advanced sensors in the world on our Navy ships and other vessels out there, on our aircraft, in the satellites, and now you're telling me that they're not the greatest for identifying UAPs?
Yeah.
Are you looking for like more of a budget now to go into this area? But when I do see them looking at this extra sensor data, that's a plus. Now here's where I may upset some of the long-term people in this field. To me, by them focusing on the new stuff, I don't think it's all bad. And here's why. This is where I get in my little soapbox now.
Okay.
When people are looking at a lot of these historical cases, especially like going back to Roswell and stuff, I'm never going to say, forget history. Absolutely not. I'm one of the ones who was in meetings when I was in education. I kept always bring up the history of things that didn't work in the past. And they keep looking at me and say, yeah, but that was the past. This is now. I said, but it didn't work. Why keep dwelling on it, But history to me is still a big thing. We can't forget that history. But when you look at these cases that they're focusing on, the naval encounters of 2004, the naval encounters 2015, naval encounters 2019, along with a number of these observations they've had off the coast by aircraft and other means, they've got newer reports coming in. They also said that they created, and this is the part that I saw as a major weakness that I wasn't surprised about. They said that the Navy created basically a new form, a standardized form for reporting a couple years ago, going back to like 2017, right after the New York Times article. So when I look at that, I'm like, wait a minute. So in 1969, when Project Blue Book ended, other than what they referred to as ATIP, you're saying that you never develop a standardized means of reporting things within the government on UFOs.
Yeah,
I don't think he wanted to know.
I actually believe that. Now, a lot of people may get PO'd at me for that, but I believe it. Why? Because you've got a number of branches in the government and the military which are competitive with each other. They're going to be doing their own things.
Sure.
yeah.
You had the Air Force running Project Blue Book. They were the ones doing everything. It wasn't the Navy. It wasn't the Army. It was Blue Book behind everything. They developed their own system. It was never standardized across the board. I could see that. You get now the Navy being put in charge. They develop a standardized procedure. And I could see that for years that either a couple things happened. That either there was no standardized method, that they would go out and they would interview these witnesses on board Navy ships, maybe interviewing Air Force pilots, other ones who had had their own sightings, interviewing all those people, but nothing was standardized as far as like a true questionnaire. I could see that. Then the other thing comes into that you talked about, Kat, that stigma. Well, you're going to have still different ones within the different branches of surface. They're going to say, well, I don't believe in all that crap. So let's kind of like debunk it or let's push it off. And you may have other ones who are more forward thinking saying, hey, I want stuff on this. But nobody's on the same page.
Yeah.
Well, isn't also going to be the fact that if they don't have to focus on the past and answer a lot of questions about mistakes made or cover-ups made, if they can start at the beginning, they actually might be a little bit more forthcoming because they're not being held accountable for past mistakes.
You're right. They may be more forthcoming. Also, they said the Air Force now has adopted the system the Navy had for reporting. A letter came out after this report from Kathleen Hicks, who's in the government office. What government office, I forget. But she's a deputy secretary. But she said that they wanted to develop a standardized system, that this is one of the things they needed to do, objectives. A new objective they were, supposed to go with. And there was supposed to be something developed across the board. Here's why I think that standardized system is critical, very important. If you get a standardized questionnaire developed that's very thorough, that you can get these reports in, that individuals who had a stigma attached to the subject, that they're more open, they want to talk about their events. You get, let's say, more honest reports coming in a standardized system. Something I think that's very critical going forward is you develop a system for artificial intelligence and data mining in these reports. You get all this information coming in from all these additional sensors, radar data, satellite data, all these other things, and you start developing artificial intelligence to, let's say, go over the reports, review them, and eliminate the stuff that it can. Oh, this stuff here, these sightings here, these were potentially tied into, let's say, a certain military testing going on. These sightings over here, they were tied into this. But these things here we have no clue about. We put those in this others category that they used, I think, in the report. That really is the unknown stuff. And you gradually start developing artificial intelligence to maybe, review these cases along with individuals. If you go back, and this is where I say that the historical reports are very important, but with historical reports, the difficulty is you've got secondhand information, third-hand information, people taking things maybe out of context. So it's how pure are those original reports? And even back then, there was nothing in a standardized format. And more importantly, you didn't have all this radar data potentially available, satellite data, all these other electrical system or data systems that you can help gather information from. If you went back and tried to put all those in to begin with, I think it'd create more of a challenge to go back and data mine these newer reports for information to really glean the stuff out. I mean, I still love historical reports because, to me, what you could do is once you get a system rolling, if you can start developing a good system to really screen these reports, to look at this stuff through maybe helping use it by artificial intelligence, then maybe you can go back and start looking at these older historical cases. Then you may be able to find similarities, patterns in these older cases that relate to this newer stuff. And you can more easily identify stuff.
Well,
and
there are data points, right? We know about certain different types of craft, certain types of sounds, certain types of physical anomalies that happen because we have all this historical data.
Right.
And all of that could be incorporated, right?
It could be, but here's one of the challenges again. As we go through time, and somebody asked me about this the other day, they said, wow, it's amazing how many Tic Tac sightings are out there now. I said, you're right. And it's amazing how many Tic Tac reports started coming in after 2017 and the New York Times article featuring the Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
That now these objects, which may have been before considered egg-shaped, oval-shaped, and so forth like that, are now becoming Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
That's one
again,
of the
again, the power of suggestion. When people, get one thing in their head, it's like right now, when people think of aliens, they think of the little dudes with the, oval-shaped heads and the big, huge bug eyes and two little dots for a nose and everything. But how do we really know exactly what they are? Who knows? That whatever it is that some people see, that it might even be some sort of a spacesuit rather than their actual skin. But yeah, I think a lot of what the government really has to go through is to weed out all of the more credible and plausible situations. And up until now, they have been, well, except for Project Blue Book, which was going out and actually talking to civilians that were citing, things that they couldn't explain. Now, I think the government is more interested in getting more credible stories from, say, the military or professional pilots, like for commercial airlines and everything. I don't think they're going to spend the time, effort, and resources to go out and talk to the average Joe. I really don't. Unlike Project Blue Book, where they did, I don't think they're going to do that now, because there's going to be people coming out. Well, there already are. Ever since this report, people are coming out and saying, "Oh, well, I saw this, I saw that." The government can't spend that kind of money to send, the men in black out to talk to these people all the time. But my question is, when it comes down to it, if the government is now telling people that are what you would refer to as reliable sources, military, commercial pilots, any type of, for like naval or army, military and otherwise, they're going to look to those people first for information, for their sightings, for their data, and so forth. And how is that any more reliable than the average person standing out in the middle of their driveway looking up and saying something, hey, and calling their local police and saying, I saw this? I mean, how are they going to weed that out? How are they going to vet that out?
You know, it's a good question because I've looked at sightings from pilots, commercial pilots. There's a number of very interesting sightings out there, but also I know they can also make mistakes in what they're seeing and how they're interpreting it, because I've gone back and taken some of these sightings that have been out there like on the internet and reviewed them, and I can see where they may have potentially seen something else from like kind of a unique angle, and it appeared as something that didn't have wings. I've gone back and used a flight tracking software and found stuff that, okay, you're telling me that this is something that it can't be a commercial aircraft. It can't be this, it can't be that. And you're implying that it basically has to be some sort of a foreign technology. Yet, how come when I go in and review this case with flight tracking software, I see an aircraft in that exact same freaking location?
Right.
Now, it's there, period. So either that thing is in the same space that your UFO is, or maybe they're the same, you know?
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that I wanted to tell one of the reports is, well, maybe you should contact the pilot of this other plane, because since they were so close, maybe they got a good view of that UFO that you saw.
Yeah.
That also didn't appear in the same video.
Yeah. So I mean, how do they vet this out? How do they weed out the ones that they would not consider the most reliable sources? Because after all, not all pilots, as you just pointed out, not all pilots have, absolute reliable, sightings and so forth.
And just to mention one more, I had a commercial pilot show me what he thought was the best UFO photograph ever, and it was a photograph of like something like a sunset, if I remember right, and it had a UFO in it that was put in there by a phone app.
Wow.
Oh dear.
And I saw it in a second. I went back and I actually found the case, reviewed the original report on that case, and the original investigator questioned the original witness about that photograph, and the guy says, "Well, I don't know how that cell phone app got put on my phone."
Oh.
The dog stepped on my phone.
Yeah, exactly. It must have been the dog or something, you know. But I think this is why they may be looking at the multiple sensors. If they focus, like you mentioned, primarily on the military reports, they look to see if they've got multiple sensor data, like a lot of stuff that they had coming in from like USS Omaha, the Nimitz, and all those cases like that. And that's one thing they can help assist to kind of, glean these cases out, because you're right, they're not going to go back and look at every civilian case out there. What they're going to look at is the cases that may catch their attention coming in by either the FAA, which still probably won't be a private individual. It'll most likely be commercial airline pilots along those lines. They're going to be looking at things within their own branches of the military, or other sensor systems that they may have that may pick up something. Yeah. Satellite data, maybe something like that. But I think they're also looking at the fact that, in theory, these individuals should be overall much better observers. So they may be playing the percentages that, okay, our pilots should be typically a much better witness than an unidentified person coming off the street. Also, they're looking at the fact that they've got all the sensor data. One of the things that I know the skeptics out there have been really jumping on, off and on, is, well, these sensors, it may be sensor data error. Well, a lot of their equipment in the military has been checked over. So, yes, there may be glitches, there may be faults, but that's going to be much more minimal overall. You're going to have a very high degree of accuracy. backing up these witnesses' testimony.
Yeah.
So I think they're really going to be focusing on these going ahead, plus the side that they look at it from national defense.
Yeah, but Thomas, there's still a stigma attached to UFO reporting. And, for a long time, pilots were warned not to make reports because, they could get dinged by their airline or whatever. So,
without a doubt.
Yeah.
And it was interesting back when the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program was being funded, as it was called. And by the way, I mentioned to you earlier, Barbara, about watching that interview with Bigelow and George Knapp. It was during that time, he actually mentioned it. He was the one who got the majority of the Advanced Aerial Identification funding because it was actually started under a different name first. And then ATIP was kind of like a nickname that had been used for it, and that one kind of like took over. But it was originally looking for advanced aerial weapons or something along those lines. It had another one of these military terms that they used for it. But when they started it, he actually put a bid in for running being involved in this program, gathering information. He put a bid in, and since he'd run NIDS for a number of years, which was a scientific group that he had that was involved with researching Skinwalker Ranch, we were talking about earlier, Kat. He was the one who got the bid. And I can see in some senses that he would have been a good choice for running that. Well, he reportedly got the bulk of that $22 million that was put up. And it's chump change in the military, but he got the bulk of that. And one of the things that happened during that time frame is that when UFO reports were coming in to, like, people wanted to contact the government, if you went in, it was right around 2008 time frame, somewhere through there, 2008, 2009, you would go into the FAA website. It said that, if you have basically a sighting, you need to contact an organization called BASS, which is Bigelow Aerospace. He had his own group out there which was examining UFO reports. So anything coming in from the FAA website being directed by that 800 number would have gone right to him. And then once the funding for the program ran out, he wasn't basically being funded by it anymore. That's when they changed it back, and now they said contact the basically the National UFO Reporting Center.
Yeah, well, I suppose once the government pulls the plug,
Yeah.
you've got to go back to either your own funds or just rely on other data and so forth.
Yeah.
I think in the long run, when it comes down to the government funding research into UFOs, or I should say unidentified aerial phenomena, as they refer to it now, I can't help but wonder what exactly are they funding? And of course, it'll never come out exactly what it is that they're going to be spending money on. What exactly are they going to be using government funding, or are they using government funding for, as far as what is out there? What are these objects?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. When I look back at, when they talk about the ATIP program that ran from 2007 to 2012, you hear that, okay, yeah, we were looking for UFOs by Luis Elizondo. But on the other hand, I'm like, what were you guys really looking for? Because I hear other ones saying, no, that was not the main goal of that program. That we were looking for basically something else. So now you look at this report for UAPs. What are you really looking for? Because you keep mentioning national defense. You mentioned national defense. Are you looking for something that's really a foreign technology? Because you basically said that, well, we're not saying they're aliens, but we're not saying they're not aliens.
Right.
What are you really saying? And you're right, Cap. What are you going to be spending these monies that you're requesting on? Well, supposedly, now going forward, they want to continue this. They want to keep looking at stuff. And they said, well, we need more money, of course. But they're wanting basically an organization set up with a whole outline of who is involved. And they've got some things that they're looking at going forward. Someplace here in front of me. I actually sent you through Skype, Henry, a letter from that Kathleen Hicks. It's just a one-page thing saying that, we've looked over a report, and what we want to do going forward is set up a procedure to synchronize collection of information from basically different branches of the military and establish recommendations for securing military test and training ranges. So that's telling me, Kat, that they're looking right now only at these military ranges with that statement, that they want a procedure set up. Because most of these events are happening in military operation areas or testing ranges. They also want to develop an organizational alignment with who's all involved. And then reports are going to be going back to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and so forth in the future.
Yeah.
But again, it's very open on what they're looking for.
Uh-huh.
Now, how many, you're the director of all of Ohio, so how many different, researchers do you have all around the state? And if they get anything, reports comes into them, do they funnel everything back to you, or do they only look for certain things and then they send it to you?
Well, when the reports come in, when people have a sighting, what they can do is go to MUFON.com, which is our international organization. And there's a link on there where they can submit a report. And just to point out to everybody, it doesn't have to be something that happened yesterday. It could be something that happened back in the 60s or before, for that matter. Again, I still like to see historical information. When that report comes in, then what it does is it gets reviewed quickly by our international organization. And one of the things they may look at is if somebody's had mention of a potential abduction. They may look at that and say, well, maybe we want to get this other team we have that's an abduction research team involved. At that point, there'll be a notation made to that. They'll also look at other things associated with the case. And then what they do is they reassign it back to the state it came from, like in this case, Ohio. And we're getting a lot of cases coming in. It's picking up the nice weather and stuff, but we're getting a lot more cases coming in. And what my chief field investigator does is he assigns them out to not just the field investigators underneath him, but he takes them. And I also take cases I still research and work with and investigate. And right now we're running 7 people, and we've got a couple other people on board looking at going through the training program. Because it's not just anybody can just walk in and become an investigator. What we've got is a training program set up that individuals who want to get involved, we've got a field investigator's manual that's put together, which is a training manual that goes through a lot of details associated with researching cases, investigating cases, different techniques you can utilize while you're investigating these. They have to review that manual and pass a certification exam as one step. If they pass that, then we also have what they call MUFON University, which is an online area where there's additional training resources available. We also, when cases come in, we assign them out to the investigators, and we have new investigators mentor with senior investigators. So they're not just basically being turned loose on their own right from day one. We're working with each other, and we also even work with each other as a team because some people have specialties that they're familiar with. that may be of benefit to the other investigators that aren't as knowledgeable about those certain areas. I get a number of cases in from all over where people wanting me to review stuff for potential connections to aircraft, researching flight data information, etc. And I'll gladly, help individuals out with those. So once those cases get reviewed by the investigators, when they get submitted, my chief field investigator looks all the cases over because he's got to prove the results once they come in. Depending on how much time I've got, I also go back and look at the cases when they come in and also when they're completed, just for my own personal knowledge of what's coming in and out of the state. But we get, right now, Henry, we're on a pace of getting about 200 reports in the last year. And we've got like 7 people working these things at 200 cases. You're talking at least 30 cases apiece. And that's a lot. And some investigators, by the way, are pulling way more than that because they want the challenge.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what area right now are you getting the most reports from in Ohio?
They're from general all over the state. But you typically, what you've got is it goes back to your higher population areas. You get more reports coming in from like Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati. And then when you look at the Cleveland area, you've got a large area right along the lake. But it really goes back to your most populous cities is where they're coming from. Hmm. But something I always look at, though, is when you get these cases coming in from the country. Sometimes we call it like coming in from the sticks, Some of those may be really interesting because, number one, you may not have a lot of aircraft in the region, so it may not be connected to that. I've always liked, the person driving down the country road or being on the farm. One great one is I had an individual who was on a farm in the southern part of the state. It was above Dayton area. And he was telling me that he was out on his back porch and he would see these orbs. And this may be of interest to you, Kat. He would see these orbs traveling across the back of the field. And he would shine, he would keep watching these things. And he also had missing time, by the way, involved with this. But something that I had to kind of chuckle at, and this is where you have to kind of laugh at, when you're involved in this field, is he says, well, I got out this like 1,000,000 candle power light. And I stood on the back porch and I started shining in the light at it, trying to signal to it. And as I signaled this thing came at me all of a sudden. And I said, important safety tip. If you see one of these, maybe it's not a good idea to necessarily shine your light at it and try to signal it to come towards you.
But don't antagonize it.
Yeah. And I said, because you really know what its intentions are right now. and we did have to kind of laugh about that. But when you hear this story and he says, I lost like an hour of time. And part of it was when he was, it was before all this happened. He says, I was driving from one point to another one. I called a family member, said I was leaving one location. And when I got there, it wasn't like the normal time frame it took him. He says, it should have taken me like, I think it's 15 or 20 minutes to get home. And it took him almost an hour and a half to get home from when he left.
Wow.
And he had this missing time, and it was right after that he was seeing this object hovering around the back of the house. And then there was another event when he was out there that his wife said he went outside and he didn't come back in for a few hours. He said, no, I was only out there for a couple minutes.
Ooh.
Yeah. But these are the ones that's extremely interesting when they pop up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Wow. Does anybody in the chat room hear me? Because it says that I've been disconnected. Looks like now I'm connected back. So I don't know what's going on sometimes around here. Anyway.
I'm being kicked on and off.
Anyway, we are going to go ahead and take a quick break. So let's see. Let me get ready, and then I'll have who takes us out.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on a minute. Let me get this set up here. And all right. Won't you go ahead and take us out the break?
Okay, you're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with your hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat Barbara Duncan, and Tabby Cat Gash, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with tonight's always wonderful, excellent guest, Thomas Wertman. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making Para-X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight. Those here in the chat room and those listening from around the world, we appreciate each and every one. So tonight, we have with us Barbara Duncan.
Hello, everyone.
Jeffrey Gould.
Hello.
Thomas Wertman.
Hello, hello.
And I don't know if Tabby Cat's still on or not.
I'm here.
All right, then. Mine says load. Mine says
Order
load
by-
user list, so it's not even
Needs
showing
to
my
be
list.
cleaned, but I'm back.
Well, good, good. Yeah, I've been getting kind of like not connected stuff too, messages. So I don't know what's going on here.
The
Anyway,
aliens are interfering with us.
I guess that's what it
Yeah.
is. So, I know. Has there been any new sightings here in the state, or has the activity increased or decreased?
Well, I'll tell you here in a quick second. It's actually picking up, I can tell you that for sure. Just because a lot of the stuff that we have coming in from the government sightings and so forth, the government reports, that's what's really helped a lot. But to give you an idea, in the last 30 days, we've had 22 reports come in the last 30 days, so it's almost a report a day that's coming in. And that's just for Ohio alone. When you go back and you look at the whole country, it's quite a bit more than that. I can't tell you that real fast, but I know that number is substantially higher. So we are getting a lot of influx on the reports, and it kind of varies too on there, Henry, because we may go a day or two without having anything and all of a sudden get like 3 or 4 in one day. In the last 90 days, we've had 62 reports come in. And when I look at the reports, a high number of these, by the way, are under investigation right now. When a report comes in, we've got 90 days to review the case, try to reach out and contact the witness, do our research or investigations, and then put a status on this case as far as the disposition, what our findings were. Most of the cases we're getting easily 60-70% fall into that category that we can identify. A lot of times it's going back to aircraft. It could be satellites. One I was just looking at was related back to a star. And this is where sometimes under CAT the challenges come in with like civilians. The report comes in, the individual says that this light is appearing in the sky in the same position night after night after night. He says it's happened for like the last week. And he says it takes 3 hours to go from basically 80% above or 80 degrees above the horizon. He watches it for like 3 hours each night.
So which planet is it?
It's actually a star.
Okay.
And what it is, I went back into my astronomy software. I can pull it up real easy. But again, sometimes people aren't necessarily looking at, what their description is. And sometimes maybe using the logic that goes along with it. they get so excited and kind of wound up into it. Well, it couldn't be a star. Well, think about it. Every night you're seeing the same thing. They're coming back for 3 hours at a time every night. So either this UFO is on a time schedule and it has to come to the region, or maybe you're seeing something that's a natural celestial object. So we're still to gain those. And then we also get sometimes videos of night vision and so forth. And those can be more of a challenge because when you look at the night vision, one thing I look at is the object being illuminated by the night vision? A number of them have like infrared lights on them. If it's being illuminated by that light only goes out so far. It doesn't go indefinitely. So it may be something very close to the witness. And that could be anything from like insect and so forth out there, something close. On the other hand, when it's illuminating things, sometimes it's very hard to discern what, let's say if this night vision is picking up something that's higher up in the sky. I mean, is it something flying around up there like a bird or something like that may be picked up? Or is it something truly unknown that we just don't want to know what it is? Those become a real challenge. But it just takes time when these things come in to really go down through and study them. Confirm the witness's story, verify everything in the report, add extra details in that they may have forgotten or just not thought may be important, add these extra details in, and just really go back and review it using as much technology as we can to go through these. But there's no particular area when I look at these, Henry, it really jumps out.
Oh. To change the subject just a little bit, because tomorrow is a banner day, Richard Branch, I believe it's 9 a.m. Eastern Time, is launching his space shuttle.
Sorry, didn't mean to snicker.
And then the Amazon guy is on the 20th.
Right.
So here we have two private industry space shuttles launching that are not under government control. They're not under any NDA. They're not under any sort of restraints from saying anything about what they see up there. How long before we start to see these private industry people saying, you know what, that's not a satellite, and most of these guys, people like Richard Branch, know what a satellite looks like.
Yeah,
so,
with Branson, his flight, was it going to be maybe like 15 minutes?
I thought it was 90.
Maybe 90, but
15 minutes of it will be weightlessness, but 90-minute flight, yeah.
Yeah, basically he's being dropped from that plane at a high altitude where they're going to fire the rockets and pretty much go straight up until they hit that point of weightlessness and then come back down. The thing is, in that 15 minutes, I don't think they're really going to see a whole lot. They're going to be focused more on their event, the billionaire event, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I'm almost picturing dueling banjos, with billionaires here. Dun-dun-dun-dun. I beat you by 9 days, and you spent how many more billions to get there?
Well, not only that, he spent a lot less money and a lot less time building his spacecraft.
You're right. Yeah, you're right on there, but I don't think there's going to be a whole lot coming out of like these. I mean, it's a great event. I mean, by any means, I mean, what Branson's doing is pushing into the private industry to be able to develop something like this, to be able to reach the edge of space, even if it's only for 15 minutes. That's a heck of an accomplishment.
Yeah.
And then when you look at what Elon Musk has done, and then also when you look at Bezos doing a similar thing, getting up there 9 days later, but nonetheless, private industry doing it. we're going to have to get farther than this. So I think you're going to have to see much longer time frames for these people up there. That, let's say, for example, you've got private flights going to the space station. I'm just curious on what's going to happen to the space station down the road. Are they going to get rid of it, or is it going to go public? You know,
Wasn't the ISS initially supposed to support that sort of thing?
I think it was. And now you've got the Chinese going out and building their own.
Well, we're going to have condos in the sky eventually. That's pretty much what's going to. So they're going to have shuttles going back up there, just like in The Fifth Element, where you have a spaceship that's going to another planet and, all this other stuff. I don't doubt it. Now, with all of these private aircraft that are going to be going into space and everything, when it comes to the government asking for sources of information on the UAPs now, will they even take these people seriously if they come back and say, hey, I saw this out there? I mean, how can you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And going back to what Barbara was asking too, it's if they see something, first of all, is it going to be taken? Are they going to be reviewing it in a serious manner? That's I think a big question at the end of the day. Will they really do that?
Yeah.
How
do we know what kind of data they're going to? Are these people required to let our FAA and our governments know what kind of equipment, surveillance, and communication equipment? Are they required to let them know what they have on board these aircraft?
Well, they most likely know pretty much everything on board those aircraft because they've been tested. If you think about it, over and over and over again, they've gone through this whole regiment to get them approved, basically, for space travel.
Okay, so the government knows what they're sending up there.
They know what they're sending up, and also they know what data they should be able to acquire.
Okay, so wouldn't that be pretty, even though it's a civilian aircraft, wouldn't they consider that a quote-unquote reliable source if they got all this fancy equipment?
To me, it should be. Now, whether they do or not, because they're still mentioning, that we have a lot of skeptics out there.
Yeah.
And they're trying to break that. But in reality, this equipment has been tested over and over and over again to get it approved. So to me, if you're getting video equipment, yes, things can fly through the videos that could be ice particles, could be anything like that associated with something that's not UFO related necessarily. But on the other hand, when you get something that, wait a minute, here's an anomaly, you can go back and, you'd want to study that data.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be stuff that they're capturing that they most likely can't explain.
Yeah, it's like John Glenn, when he went up and he saw what he referred to as firefly. What the heck was that? And he couldn't explain it. He was an experienced pilot. He had, been in the air for, hundreds of flight time. And there were so many, people that were listening to him, and they could tell by the inflection in his voice that he was completely, surprised at what he saw and had no clue. And to this day, they still don't know what it was that was out there. Even with today's technology, and they've looked at the footage and everything, they still can't tell you what it was that John Glenn saw.
Exactly, and that's why I think that, even though it's a civilian, maybe a civilian craft, that they're still going to want to pull that data and review it for situations like this.
Yeah.
And what about that, what do they call it, the Black Knight thing? That UFO that's been supposedly circling?
That one there. I haven't looked at that in a long time, Barbara. You're really testing my memory tonight. Because that was one I remember when the video came out. of this object they termed as the Black Knight. It was popping up all over the internet. And there wasn't a whole lot of information out on this thing. And I can't, to be honest with you, I can't remember a lot of details about it. Because I think I wrote it off as either like it was a hoax or something along those lines. That it was a hoax or something of the photos, something, there was some questions about it. But nonetheless, I mean, you see, if they do pick up something like that in their cameras, to me, they're going to want to pull all the data they can associated with it, including civilian.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, did they ever? Do we know what's on this space shuttle? Or any of them really? Certainly, they have some sort of tracking systems, but if this is a commercial venture, they're not going to have any of the sophisticated type of equipment that, or maybe even more sophisticated, because it's private. How do we know what's on these ships that they are actually going to send up?
The only way would be is if basically, to me, if the companies are saying that this is what's on these ships, if they're giving you more specific information. I haven't looked at, let's say, for example, like SpaceX, their website, to see a real breakdown of what's in that capsule. But then again, they may tell you these are the features we have on this capsule compared to, let's say, the Apollo and the other capsules in the past, or the shuttle for that matter. But there's still going to be things that they're most likely not telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you've got your telemetry sensors that they use when they go in for docking and stuff like that. But there may be a question, what can these sensors really detect beyond that? Yes, they may be tracking, like as you approach the International Space Station, they may be, pick up some location. But could these same sensors pick up UFOs, UAPs, or whatever you want to call them today?
Yeah.
Could they
Now,
be
do
picking up?
I don't think Elon Musk has even talked about aliens, really. Has he?
Not that I'm aware of.
I have no idea what his belief system is on any of this.
Well, he's kind of a unique individual.
Well, yeah. Putting it mildly, yeah.
In some of the interviews I've seen with him, I can't argue. I mean, the guy's intelligent because look at what he's done,
Sure.
Even if you're not doing it yourself, he's finding the right people who can accomplish it. And then he's built the money up to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. So you can't knock his accomplishments along those lines. But I don't know if I'd predict what's going through his mind.
I'm not even sure he can at the time. But
wasn't he the one who lit up a joint on
Yep.
Joe Rogan show?
Yep.
And NASA wasn't really happy about that because they didn't really like the image it was portraying.
Yeah, how can you rely on somebody that's lighting up a joint to send an aircraft into space and say, "Oh wow, man, I just saw a UFO."
And
I'm sorry. How are you going to take somebody like that seriously?
In his defense, he's not the one flying the spacecraft.
Oh, thank goodness.
and then he's also putting about what his goal is, like 10,000 satellites, 10,000 plus satellites
As if
for
we
Starlink.
don't have enough cluttering space.
That's it.
Thank you.
Exactly. But I would never try to picture what's on his mind. I wouldn't even want to go there.
But it's interesting that he doesn't talk about that, and I don't know whether it's just an oversight or he's mostly focused on getting us to another planet as opposed to what's coming to ours. To know that if he's even thinking about any sort of detection level for his astronauts to say, yes, there's stuff up there, we're watching it.
He maybe is more focused on the goal that, okay, I want to develop this space program to be able to get to the space station. Goal of maybe the moon, goal of maybe the Mars, etc. He may be more focused on those and maybe just who knows? I don't know. I'm just throwing some things out there for thought. But what if he's on like the small print of some of their pages where they have all these goals at? Oh, and by the way, if we encounter aliens, we do this. He may be
Most likely,
more,
he's got his own parameters, and
I
he's
should
not telling anybody.
Could
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
I should send him a tweet and ask.
and then I mean, he's put together a great space program.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
when I see the things that they've accomplished, it's just the things that you only saw in 1950s B movies. Sending a rocket, having it land exactly where it took off at.
And we used to watch movies from the 50s and 60s where they land like that.
Right.
Mhm.
And the first thing out of my head was, my God, I just watched Flash Gordon.
Yeah. I can't help but think that, okay, what if they were the ones involved with the next moon landing and so forth? Could they accomplish a ton more?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look at the U.S. government and their budget and everything, and of course there used to be a joke about how much the government would spend for a toilet seat, on a requisition and everything. If you look at what people like Musk are paying out of their pocket for research, development, and actually implement the space program, the government taking that amount of money and putting it into what they're currently doing. And of course, now we're kind of at a standstill when it comes to space. But yet, private industries that are taking and sending people into space, I'm dumbfounded. Why is that? Where somebody that only has a limited amount of, millions, but the government is just suddenly at a standstill and says, oh, no, we don't have them. I'm dumbfounded.
Yeah, it's like once we got to the moon, we just kind of stopped there at the major goals.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was because of the Cold War era. Kennedy wanted to really get there before the Russians. That was the key thing. There's an interesting audio out where he didn't really support the space program, according to the audio. It was just he wanted to beat the Russians. That was the main thing. That was his goal. He wasn't really interested in the space program whatsoever.
Well, yeah, that was post Bay of Pigs, and he had to show up.
Yeah.
The Soviet Union.
Worked.
So yeah.
Right. And now that, like you say, the private space programs have really picked up and rolled with their own money to a high degree. And look at what they've accomplished in a short time.
Well, with people like Musk and some others that are wanting to send their own private aircraft into space, I wonder what, and I do believe that there are beings out there in the universe that are different than ours, that may quite possibly be watching us. I wonder what they're going to think about this. They've already kept track of everything that's been going on for a number of years, and I wonder what they're thinking about these, what I would refer to as almost tourists going up in a spacecraft.
If you look at all the junk that's orbiting the Earth right now, and if you've seen the photographs, it's horrendous. My first reaction is, finally, you're going to clean up your trash in your yard. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thomas, it's how people can launch through all of that, let alone people on the ground trying to discern what is a satellite space junk or a alien spacecraft must be really difficult.
Oh, when I've got my astronomy software, I can view satellite. You can set it to view basically ones which are much more visible. But when you start loading in and you start saying, okay, go ahead and show me like a little bit of everything, it's incredible how much junk that you're seeing from the ground up potentially. The good thing from UFO point of view, trying to track them down, is a lot of it's not visible, so I can kind of filter a lot of that stuff out. But with satellites, we were doing a sky watch the one night. We went out to a state park which had very little ambient light. Individuals were looking up, and the thing that they weren't doing is they weren't using apps to monitor satellites coming over. It was amazing how many of them they were pointing out were UFOs, and I'm standing over in the corner with my phone looking at my app. Yep, another satellite, another satellite, another satellite. And it was amazing how many of them they were seeing when you had very little ambient light, that you really had great visibility.
Do you remember seeing that YouTube video of some guy? I can't remember what he was using, whether it was a phone or a digital camera, that saw things flying across the moon.
Yeah,
and it was kind of like spread out.
Yeah. I've had different. I don't know if I know the exact one you're talking about, but I've actually had pictures sent to me by a member of an astronomy group who took stuff traveling. And some of the stuff he was actually photographing wasn't clear out by the moon. It was actually like birds flying above. And it happened to cross the field of view. Then I had some other ones where it did appear to be something potentially like a satellite crossing the path between the Earth and the moon. It was kind of making like a dark shadow, which is kind of really difficult to track down. I mean, I could have spent probably a couple hours and figured out what it was. But it was just having the time and then, really wanting to dig into it that deep. I've seen some unusual ones.
Yeah. I remember years, I think it was right after I moved into the house where we're living now, which was in 2006. And we have a very beautiful view of the sky up here. I used to live in a very populated area where light pollution was horrid. You couldn't see anything. But up here, I can see an awful lot. And I remember going outside one night and, just enjoying the night air, and just looked up in the sky, and I kept seeing this little tiny white light going across the sky. Like, what in the heck is that? It was too high to be an airplane. It certainly didn't have the shape of an airplane. It wasn't giving off any kind of a tail. And it was actually, literally sometimes blanking out a little bit of the stars. And I just watched it for the longest time. And the next day I got on the computer and looked it up, and sure enough, I was watching one of our satellites. I'm like, really? That was weird. I had never... So until you're out in an area where it's, there's no ambient light and everything, you have no clue what you can see in that night sky that's visible with the naked eye.
We went down to the astronomy club. They do a what they call star party every year, where it's just a big event where anybody can come out on one weekend each year. Everybody brings their telescopes out. The group itself has a 36-inch telescope reflector, along with I don't know how many other telescopes that they've got. But the reason they chose that location is because it's basically almost got like zero ambient light. If you go down there and the moon is not out, and I mean, it can be a clear sky, you better have a flashlight or you're going to be walking in the trees or something. Because, I was down there, Henry, and laughed, but I could not see my hand in front of my face. It was that dark.
I have problems doing that with light.
But when you look up, it's amazing. And that's why they put the telescopes down there, because it's a fantastic area, because you don't have some of the smog, etc., from the city. You're out in the country.
Yeah.
Very few lights around the region. Matter of fact, even where the telescope is at, I mean, they've got lights set up in red for night when they're doing stuff out there. And I think they only had like one security light around the area. They didn't even have it that close because they didn't want anything around the telescope. But I mean, when you look up though, it's like, wow.
So how did they actually plan on getting rid of a lot of the space junk that's just floating around up there? I mean, can they shoot lasers at it, or can they go up there and kind of like push it back toward Earth's gravity so it comes in and gets destroyed that way? Or how are they supposed to get rid of all that stuff?
Well, I think they're looking at all the above, because they've looked at the thought of having basically something push it out of orbit. Like you could have another sort of a rocket go up that's got some sort of an object on it that could actually kind of like knock it out of orbit, push it out of orbit, to send it back down. They've also looked at the possibility of the lasers doing damage to them to bring them back down.
Yeah,
so
but wouldn't that break them up even more? Because from what I understand, even the smallest minute piece of debris, if it's heavy enough, if it hits one of the satellites or, the space station or something, it can still create a hole because of the speed that it's traveling.
That's correct. That's the challenge. They've got the other challenge associated with it. It's like, how long has that satellite been up there, and what type of a energy system does it have on it? Is it something that could be radioactive, like some sort of a nuclear type device, right, providing power to this thing?
Like the Mir space station?
Yeah. Matter of fact, one of the movies that's on tonight is Space Cowboys.
Yeah. That was a good
one. When they went up the Russian satellite that actually had nukes on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they've got to identify, whose satellite it is, the purpose of the power plant on these things. They've got to look at all those before they even think about bringing it down. And then you're correct on there too, Kat. I mean, if you start bringing it down, is there anything else in the way? You don't want to take out $1 billion communication satellite by hitting of some type of a junk you're trying to bring down.
Yeah. I mean, anybody that knows anything about ballistics, and my husband and I are avid shooters, or we used to be, if you hit a target that is, capable of, exploding outward, with debris, I don't care what kind of trajectory that it has, it's going to go outward. So even if you use a laser for something, it's going to break it up. It's not necessarily going to destroy it, it's just going to break it up.
Right.
Well, it depends on the type of laser that you use. You could also use one because, remember, it's space, there's no atmosphere. So, I mean, you could theoretically nudge it out of orbit.
To me, you would almost have to be behind it rather than in front of it. To me, if you're going to hit something in front of something, it's going to either push it forward or it's going to push it to the side, not bring it toward you.
No, I want to push it into the sun.
Yep. Push it out away from orbit around the Earth, where it just travels right on out into space somewhere.
Yeah, well, then we'll aggravate the dickens out of the Martians then, because we'll push it into their space instead.
That's fine with me.
What we need is a giant trash hauler up there to go around, collect them and recycle them.
Yeah.
So we were talking before the show started about Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring back a part of what you were talking about, which is Bigelow's cooperation within the aeronautics group and the rockets, etc. And then all of a sudden he packs everything up. What they're saying is he's boxed up all of his data and would not provide that to the new owners. So is it possible that there was some sort of spacecraft testing on that ranch Walt Bigelow owned it, and would that have added to what the type of activity that there is now?
Well, see, one of the things I was watching on in that video where Bigelow was being interviewed, and George Knapp was asking him questions about the ranch and associated with it. And one thing about Bigelow is, I believe him when he said he probably put more money into his UFO program, researching UFOs and what the government gave him. I can see that because he appears to be that type of guy that once he latches on to something. But then when the funding runs out, did he pull up because the funding ran out? Or is it because he maybe had the answers he wanted? Maybe, like, when you look at what his program that he ran called NIDS, they basically said that, they weren't finding enough results, and that was part of the reason they pulled out. But on that interview, though, he said something extremely interesting, Barbara. He said that one of the things that was happening on the ranch, and I remember the term he used now, he said that they had different ones out there, and they had hitchhikers, was his word. Now, he was implying that there was some type of an entity. He wasn't specific on whether it was like interdimensional, where it was coming from. But these hitchhikers were following people even after they left the ranch. And that was part of the reason that he got out of it. I think he may have been also getting a little bit scared that when these, as he called them, hitchhikers, were following, let's say, government officials after they left or going along with them. He was getting concerned. And I think maybe his concern was he didn't want somebody to be endangered by something they got from the ranch. And I'm just wondering if he didn't say, maybe this is the right time to get out. I've got a potential buyer, as he said. He found there was a buyer that wanted it. And I think maybe he saw that as the right opportunity to say, okay, let's break free of this. And then go ahead, Barbara.
Well, I was going to say, did he ever indicate that he was followed?
Well, he said he'd had his own experiences out there.
Okay.
But he said that he wasn't, and I'm going out of memory here, he wasn't affected, like it wasn't like in a negative way. There was like bad things happening to him, like some have reported, like you were talking about earlier, with one of the individuals involved with the ranch. He said it wasn't along those lines. So he wasn't being affected basically in a negative way. But I just wonder if he didn't look at it from the fact that, hey, I've got a buyer, the time is right, let me move on. And that way maybe he could also take his resources in a different direction, because when he said that he was involved with the ATIP program, he said that they were looking at the UFO side, but also they were looking at the consciousness side. He was very big into consciousness and things associated with it. You mean
altered states of consciousness or extraterrestrial consciousness in contact?
Well, it wasn't necessarily even extraterrestrial. It was also looking at potentially like the afterlife, what happens to human consciousness. And when you looked at some of the people associated with his organization, he didn't have just people associated with UFOs. He always had people involved in the medical community in his group. And I was kind of interested in that, like, from the point of view, like, is he looking for like what aliens would be like? But no, he was really looking at the human factor. And something that kind of struck me was, I was almost picturing him, because he said that he lost his wife. And I wondered if maybe he wasn't trying to also see if there's a way to reach to the other side. And I'm just curious. I was curious about that because remember how Houdini was very much affected by his mother's passing.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was basically debunking all the skeptics or all the ones out there trying to help him communicate with his mother. And he was basically taking all these people apart.
Right.
Well, to me, I'm almost wondering if, I don't see Bigelow doing it that way, but maybe just researching things to that point of view. Is there a way to communicate with the other side?
It certainly would explain Homestead 3 and that portal thing that they kept talking about. With the rabbi opening up a portal of some sort, and then they started seeing strange entities and lights and stuff.
That's right. And that's why, you know, he said he made the biggest mistake in trying to focus on two different areas, UFOs and consciousness. And that he thought he should have only focused on one then as like an afterthought.
Yeah.
And to me, the question is which one? And to me, now it seems like he's really focusing on the consciousness side.
Well, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive.
No.
When you look at the alien contact that some people seem to have indicated they're having, a lot of it is via telepathy or some sort of consciousness connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think that, you know, that that's something I think he would really like to pursue, but it seems now like that's maybe what he's going after now. That he's kind of backed off of the Skinwalker Ranch, and now he's going after consciousness, and that's what, if I'm right, when I looked at his one website, that's what it's associated with now. It's leaning more in that direction.
Yeah.
And who knows why and how much information was really transferred, because we when they talk on TV, they tell us, you know, okay, he didn't give us anything or whatever, but is that really factual? Or did stuff get passed on that they don't want to talk about?
Yeah.
Or something that just isn't useful for them. Yeah.
Yeah. When I look at the show, I mean, some of the things I look at when they see the things in the sky, to me, they're giving too quick of an answer that if you look at it from maybe some other points of view, you may be able to identify some of those things.
Yeah.
Oh, heck yeah.
But some of the things that the question marks, though, is I'd like to see a lot more detail about some of the unusual frequencies they're noting, the spikes in these frequencies at certain time frames, and how it's affecting the individuals, along with when they describe, you know, like the tracking things moving like underground. I'm curious about that. Is it something connected with like underwater water flow or underground water flows, something along those lines? There's so many things I'd like to know.
Yeah, I mean, that even goes along with, you know, just general paranormal phenomena where, you know, as investigators, we're, you know, pretty much attuned to the fact that a lot of paranormal phenomena comes around flowing water, whether it's, you know, underground or you can actually visually see it. There's something about flowing water that just seems to attract or accentuate or even, you know, magnify phenomena. We don't know why. It just happens.
And there's things like that I really like to look at, Undercat. You know, when they were putting the, you know, the electrodes in the ground. Well, I'd like to know more about what they were really doing, because I remember as a kid, we used to chase night crawlers up out of the ground by putting two electrodes in the ground.
Yeah.
So the ground conducts,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And depending on the soil composition, I mean, what they may be getting is nothing unusual, depending on the soil out there.
Okay.
But then,
our time is quickly running out. I got one particular question I wanted to throw out for everybody, and you can tell me which one you want. If you had your chance, would you go to Skinwalker Ranch or would you go to Oak Island?
Oak Island.
Oh yeah, I want a big swamp. I'm going to Oak Island.
No, I definitely do Skinwalker.
I'm with you, Jeffrey. I'll go Skinwalker. Matter of fact, I'll put my name out there right now if they want to contact me.
Okay. And
They had me at Templar Night. I'm going
where
to
are you
Oak
going to
Island.
go? Yep, Oak Island. So, Henry,
I'm going
break
to
the
Oak
tie.
Island.
Where are you going?
Oak Island. Unless,
Oh, right.
unless they actually invite Thomas to go somewhere, he can always stop by and pick me up.
Henry.
Way to suck up, Henry. I'm serious. If they want me to go out to Site 3, hey, give them my contact info, Henry. I'm on board.
All right.
I'm up for it. I've had a long, healthy life, so you know.
So if you get sucked into that portal, Thomas, you're going to go happy, right?
That's right. If I go into that portal and they never have me on another show again.
Oh,
But
goodness.
I can just see
Although-
him now going, think of the ratings.
Yeah, although if I could reach you from the other side, look at your rating then.
All right. Our time is, like I say, just about out. We got less than 4 minutes. So, Tabby, who we got for next week?
Okay, next week, our very special guest is Jeff Mudgett. He is the author of Bloodstains, which is based on the life, times, and serial crimes of his own great-great-grandfather, H.H. Holmes, and also in which the current docu-series on TV, The American Ripper, is based upon. So,
All right,
Yeah.
then.
Woo!
So, with that, we got less than 3 minutes. Any final words, Thomas?
Oh,
Any final words? No,
Yeah.
I'm just putting my name out there.
Oh.
If anybody from the Navy wants to contact me, I'll go out and board a Navy ship, even though I may get seasick.
Should.
Skinwalker,
whole lot
I'm
of
open for it.
Dramamine.
That's right.
Wow. All right, Barbara, any last things?
Oh, I think Jeff wanted to say something there.
All right, Jeff.
I wanted to point out I will not be here next week. I'll be on set for something.
Okay, that sounds
It's a big
good,
hush
Jeff.
hush project, so it should be cool.
All right, we'll take care of that. I'll let Tabby introduce everything then. So how does that sound?
Hey,
I
Sounds
think it
like a
ought to
plan.
be fun.
Enjoy, Jeff.
Yeah.
All right.
And Thomas, so the International MUFON group, it's MUFON.com.
Yes, MUFON.com.
And if they need to get in touch with you directly,
They can reach out to me at mufon.twertman@gmail.com.
okay.
Or if you're me, you can just contact him directly.
Yeah.
Or if you're with Prometheus, contact, his people
Or-
through your people.
Or if you're a remote viewer, we got a direct connection.
All right.
We want to make sure that they can get in touch with you, Thomas.
Yep, sure do. And who knows what might be going on now that they're based in Cincinnati.
Well, I don't know if they've ever had anybody from MUFON on the ranch. Not that I can tell.
Actually, yes, I believe so.
Okay.
But not recently. It was actually, I believe, a former director who was there.
Wow. All right. With that, we're going to jump off. And I hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight. We will see you next week at the same time. This is Henry Foister.
Tabby
Barbara
Cat
Duncan.
Cash.
Barbara Duncan.
Congratulations.
And Jeff. Jeff can say he's gone.
No, I said my name. Did it not come through?
Nah,
It did.
you got stepped on, I think. So
Oh,
good enough, folks.
I'm
All
not
right.
saying it's aliens.
We
but
are
it's
we
aliens.
are out of here. We will see you next week at the same time. So good night, everybody.
Good night, Dick.
You've been listening to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. Join us again next week at the same time for more of the Paranormal View.